Welcome back to the show. It's good to finally see Nico Iamaleava at a Media Day event after the quarterback was a notable omission by Tennessee at SEC Media Days last year. Nico's now a UCLA Bruin. It's safe to say that the attention that he's gotten warranted by a high-profile transfer to Westwood from Knoxville. Our Cover 3 podcast crew caught up with the talented quarterback, and here's a little snippet of it.
So I got to ask, I haven't heard much about you this offseason. Anything interesting happen?
Yeah, man. I officially came back home and found me a place at UCLA, and yeah, man, I'm excited at what we got going on.
What was that process like for you? I mean, it was crazy. We cover the sport for a living. We haven't seen a story like that, since we've been covering it. What was it like for you personally? Because people had their theories. You're taking a lot of criticism. What was that like for you?
Yeah, me personally, man, it was me just wanting to get back home to my family. And Coach Fox gave me the opportunity to do that, and, I couldn't pass up on that. So I'm happy where I'm at, and, I'm excited, to go to work with the boys.
So how's the transition been for you now that you're with the Bruins and you're getting in the new offense with Tino Sinceri? How are things going so far?
Transition's been great, man. It's, a little different than, what I'm used to coming from Tennessee. Yeah, man, I love what Tino has going on, just the different verbiage, the different, play style that he has. I'm adapting well to it, so.
Ever since, you were a prospect coming up in high school, there's always been a ceiling, a projection, a thought of what you were going to be able to accomplish. As you start to think about your own progression and maybe even look back at a successful season at Tennessee, right? Making the college football playoff, racking up a lot of wins. Yeah. What are some areas about your game that you're really looking to improve on as now you're trying to get it done with the new team at UCLA?
For sure, yeah. I think it's really just my control and, demand of the offense. I think, really going into the details of, what we have going on and really executing all the little things that we need to in our offense. And I think that's something that we got to work on every day, coming to practice, and I think we're doing a good job at that.
Nico going back to Southern California, back to his roots. As we take a look at Danny Kanell's Big Ten quarterback rankings, Nico Iamaleava comes in the top 10, checking in at number 7. Let's head out to Big Ten Media Days at Mandalay Bay with our team anchored by the great Jenny Dell. Hey, Jenny.
Hey, Tommy. So we got Danny Kanell here, Josh Pate, Chip Patterson. We just saw some of that conversation that went down with Nico. Not an easy position to be at. We discussed that he was not at Media Days last year with Tennessee. He knew he was going to come into some scrutiny here. How do you think he handled it?
I think he was very well prepped. I think he clearly had his talking points there.
Home.
But home, going back to family, going back to the West Coast. I think it's always fascinating, though, because when it was going down, I hated this story. Like, it was really the first holdout we saw. I don't think it was very professional. I thought it looked like it was a selfish player making a decision that was just in his best interest. It's almost like you start to not like the player, and it's because we're at such a distance. But then when he sits down on the couch and you see him and he's, he's humble, he's soft-spoken, he's friendly, you're like, oh, this is a human being here that we're talking about. And it was a decision that was influenced by his family, and it probably wasn't so much his brother as it was his father. And maybe there were some missteps along the way, but as far as how he's handling it now, I think he's handling it great.
We were always going to have a case study. We were going to have like a cautionary tale in the new NIL portal era of someone who, I'm not going to use the words held up a university for money, because I don't necessarily think that's an accurate way to portray how it went down. I do think that there was an effort to get more money out of Tennessee, and finally someone called a player's bluff, and then it forces you into a bad situation. You're kind of burning both ends of the candle, and look, I understand what he talked about wanting to go home. UCLA was not his destination. I mean, that was not his end goal in this whole thing. It was what was left on the table of possibilities, and at the end, it didn't look like, Chip, there were many other possibilities on the table. You hope he can make the best out of a bad situation, but what Danny just said, it's not just the player involved in these situations. You've got an entire sphere, an orbit. When you talk about someone's camp, that's what we're talking about. And so there are a lot of moving parts in this. He's probably learned this lesson the toughest of ways, but I think it's been a learning experience for everyone to just observe it and to understand that at the end of the day, yeah, it's a human involved, and hopefully thousands of other players and their camps are learning from this, and we don't copy and paste this every spring.
Nico Iamaleava has had scrutiny and been in the crosshairs since that very first NIL deal with Tennessee.
Yeah.
The one that you agreed to coming out of high school because of the laws in the state of California. And so, he has always going to be, whether it is a cautionary tale, whether it's the poster boy, he is going to be the face of this era when we go back and we write books about college football right now. And so I started to think about where Nico is, and he's thinking about, ways that I can improve myself for the NFL, ways that I can be able to be a better quarterback. I did think it was interesting. He pointed to the verbiage. He said things are a little bit different than Tennessee. Yet, yes, the community is different, but the offense is different. He's got a new offensive coordinator in Tino Sinceri, who I do think is going to set him up for success as best as possible. But the win total, the expectations, wildly different from Tennessee this season than UCLA. And so it'll be very interesting to get him out on the field and see what he's able to take advantage of.
I want to talk more about expectations of UCLA in a second, but Danny, as a former player, when you're dealing with a guy that's coming into this situation and someone that's supposed to be an established leader of your program, how do you think he wins over that locker room? Do you think he already has? There have been very positive reports so far, but that's a difficult position for him to be in.
It is, and that was one of the questions I asked him was how do you, because it takes time, and really, you don't really develop the best chemistry and the best trust in your teammates until you all truly go to battle together, like until the regular season starts and you're in that huddle and the players are looking at you how to respond. But I love the fact that he said, hey, we had a bowling outing, I'm trying to get my guys together, but ultimately it's going to take time and it's going to take a lot of effort. And I think he's a good kid. I think he's going through that process now, but ultimately he's not fully going to develop the trust and chemistry with his teammates until the regular season gets here.
This is not a new concept. Like, it's not that Nico's the only guy out there, even high-profile guy that's moved. So I think a lot of the players on rosters, UCLA included, they're probably conditioned to understand a lot of us have moved. Sure. I mean, not everyone on that roster signed with UCLA out of high school either.
He's not the only spring portal edition getting in there. Yeah.
So I just think the way a team coalesces and gels, whether you like it or not, and I got my own personal feelings on it, it may not be like it was even 5 or 10 years ago, much less 20 or 30 years ago. But here's the thing. You were talking about last year, what he did and didn't do, and then the makeup of this team. They couldn't run the ball last year. They couldn't play quality defense last year. What happens if he goes out there with arguably a lesser supporting cast, but he's asked to do more production-wise? Because there were prolonged periods of offensive drought. Tennessee was carried by defense last year. So I wonder about the progression of the player on top of all the off-the-field stuff.
Yeah, this is a wonderful challenge for Deshaun Foster, who, 1 year ago, remember at the podium, it was kind of a little bit of an uncertain start. The Hawaii game didn't go particularly well for the Bruins, at least in terms of looking like everything was put together. And so I just think that was the first thing out of his mouth, Coach Foster. And so Deshaun Foster, the player coach, what can he be able to offer to Nico to help him this season?
When you think about the transition, and you touched upon it briefly, going from Tennessee and the weapons that they might have had there to this UCLA program, are there certain players that stick out that you feel like he can grow in this QB position and really showcase his abilities?
I think he's going to have a better offensive line than what they had last year. That's one of the things that I think Deshaun Foster realizes as a former running back. He wants to be able to run the football, but I thought it was interesting talking about some of that verbiage. It's a very different system than what he was running at Tennessee. And that's why I always, Chip, you know this because we've had a lot of quarterbacks come through the Cover 3 podcast. I'm always, and coaches too, I'm always like, how long does it take you to get comfortable? And the fact that it was such a late addition, that's my biggest concern for him as he comes into the season. How do they do they have a smaller offensive package for him and they kind of work him in? Do they throw the whole thing at him and try to see if he's ready for it? But that process is not that easy. I think people, that play a lot of, college sport, EA Sports, college sports, think, oh, you just out there just, calling plays. It's easy. Right, exactly. It's not. The verbiage, and that was when he said that, I was like, it can be a struggle sometimes to become fluent in a new language, and I'm curious to see how that process unfolds over the course of the season.
Think about how we used to judge head coaches. You're a head coach, you take the job. Usually that means you're married with a quarterback. Ideal world, it's a freshman or a sophomore. So you two are going to grow together. You're going to recruit the talent to surround him, but he's going to progress in your system. Again, this is not the only example of this, but this is yet another example of such a new world, and your fate, your job as a head coach, sometimes is, in fact, oftentimes is tied to a guy you didn't recruit, a guy that hasn't come up in your system. And because you get paid so much money, everyone thinks you pop it in the microwave now, and you're just supposed to get immediate results. Never mind that that's not the way it's ever worked or ever will work, but just the nature of how different development is now and how different the overall coalescing of a team is now. That's changed in the last decade. Like, that's not something that happened over 50 years. That stuff's changed in the last decade, and I don't know that people have fully recalibrated the way that they look at college football to account for that.
I'll tell you what UCLA fans think. They think they've got a better chance in coin flip games because this is a program that had a win total of 5.5. You hope to be a bowl game. You hope to see an improvement. And as you are going to be going into this season with Joey Aguilar, there is a talent jump that you have with Nico Iamaleava coming in to be your quarterback. So if the difference in those tough October and November conference games is going to be, do you have a quarterback that can go make a play? UCLA fans can and should feel more confident that they've got a better chance to get those plays with Nico.
Now, let me just, that would be very sunshine-ish. There's a lot of rainbow and unicorn in that, and we hope that's the way it works out for their sake. You know, there's another world where they struggle offensively again this year, and they look across the country, and the guy they had for a second that left is maybe not lighting it up in Heupel's system, but they're hanging better offensive numbers than Nico is. At that point, I'm just telling you, whether it's responsible or not, the conversation will become very reckless and uncomfortable.
Yes, I was going to hit on the same exact point, because there's going to be comparisons between Joey Aguilar and Nico all season long.
Oh, good segment idea. Let's do it week by week on the Cover 3
And
podcast.
last year we saw it a little bit when Will Howard left Kansas State, and he was kind of shown the door by Chris Kleiman, and Avery Johnson took over. But that was Kansas State, and Will Howard had great success. With Tennessee being an SEC program, the way it all unfolded, how ugly it was, Jenny, I think that's going to be a storyline that we'll see how it plays out. But if it's not going great for either one of these programs, it's going to get a lot of attention.
We're going to be talking about it for sure. Just to wrap things up here, you look at this UCLA program, 5-7 last year. They started 1-5, finished off stronger with 4-2 record. When you have, if you look at the schedule, too, coming up, what are your expectations for this year? What win total are we looking at?
I think they go over their win total. I think they could get to a bowl and potentially 7 wins. They're going to be better at quarterback position. I mean, if you compared these two quarterbacks who they had last year, who's now at Tennessee, and Joey Aguilar, I think that's one piece of the equation, but it's also Deshaun Foster's second year. You saw them really buy in. They didn't fall apart at the beginning of the season when it started so rough, and that's something I always look for, is sort of a locker room dynamic. Are they buying into what the coach is selling? I think he's got a culture that is going to slowly get better and better, so I think they're going to be much improved from last year.
If those intangibles click in place, there is a high level where they're a bowl team, but more importantly than whether you won 6 or 7, you're coming out saying, oh, he's the right guy for the job. Like, you're looking for confirmation bias that you hired the right guy, and that's still kind of up in the air, I think, maybe from an outsider's perspective. Right?
They can't get off to a slow start.
Right.
You know, they need to be 2-1 in the non-conference play. They need to take care of business against Northwestern. You know, the game against Michigan State. Those are those coin flip type games where if they are able to, because of their new quarterback, be able to be on the winning side of it, then they can achieve those goals of making it to the postseason.
Nico will be on display. UCLA, he'll be making his debut August 30th against Utah. Tommy, back to you in the Florida studios.
Thank you, guys. Certainly appreciate it. Good stuff as always. A reminder about the big time, 3:30 Eastern every Saturday, and it returns August 30th. College football is nearly upon us, folks, on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.